if you give a lecture on the delegitimization of Israel, it always carries the risk that I am in fact turning this into a course on how you're going to defame and demonize people. It's very simple to defame people. I can pick anyone in this audience, you don't know each other very, very well. I can say, your sister is a prostitute. It has taken me less than a minute to utter this fabrication. And the person in question will have great difficulty in absolving his or her sister from this accusation. She may not even have a sister. Let her prove it that she doesn't have a sister. How do you prove that you don't have a sister? Now you think this is a theoretical example. Well, years ago, the wife of the previous German president, Bettina Wolf, was accused that she had worked as an escort girl. No proof has ever been presented. No witnesses have ever confirmed this. But it keeps sticking to her and will stick to her throughout her whole life. That, in a nutshell, is how the demonization process of Israel functions. The defamer has a tremendous advantage over the defender because you invent lies very rapidly, the accusations come swiftly, and the defense is lengthy, difficult, and in some cases it is expensive. In August 2009, Sweden's largest daily tabloid, the Social Democrat Aftonbladet, published an article implying that the Israeli Defense Forces kill Palestinians to provide the Israeli medical establishment with harvested organs. The idiot who wrote that took him a few hours. The Jewish people who have many centuries of experience of being demonized. So what I want to do with you in this very shortened presentation is to look at the demonization methodology systematically. The best tool to defame somebody is a lie. Lies can be invented on the spur of the moment. For instance, as you all know by reading the scriptures, there has never been a Jewish temple on the Temple Mount. The liar says it has never been there. And now the onus moves to the defendant, the Jews. The leading contemporary anti-Semitic lie is Holocaust denial. And you can find that in many publications of Muslim governments. What means this lie? That the Jews have invented a huge genocide which has never taken place. Thus the Jews are the biggest liars in history. There are many other smaller lies. For instance, the Palestinians, which became a people a few decades ago, are of course the original inhabitants of this country. Here, Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a long Egyptian publication of this out of the peaceful Muslim world, horseman without a horse, showing that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion are real. Now, lies, I said I'm giving a course. Lies are only one method to demonize people. There are also others. You can demonize people through accusations about the future, which you have invented. About 45% of the European population, other than people who are babies or senile, believe another accusation, that Israel intends to exterminate the Palestinians. Well, the Europeans, the Germans, did that much faster. If we wanted to, we could have done it long ago. These were the findings of a study, great detailed study, carried out by the University of Bielefeld in Germany. And it is one among many aspects of the growing ideological criminality of Europe. A third method of demonizing Israel is exaggerations. For instance, in 2002, on Passover, a Palestinian murderer killed 30 people in a hotel on Passover, and he wounds more than 100. The Israeli army goes into the Palestinian camp in Jenin, where many suicide murderers and terrorists come from. At most 70 people were killed, largely terrorists. One of the most prominent Palestinian spokesmen, Saib Erekat, tells CNN that there were 500 deaths in Jenin. There were deaths, so it is not an outright lie. But it is an exaggeration, and that's how Erekat demonizes Israel. This in combination with the omission of Erekat, that most of those killed were terrorists. I have so far dealt with only one part of the delegitimization process. How do you demonize a person? By only using verbal methods. And I haven't even used all the verbal methods. I come to that. Now, this whole process of how do you delegitimize people is a fairly opaque process. In order to fight delegitimization, we have first of all to know how it functions. That means that we also have to understand what is it, delegitimization, how it overlaps with anti-Semitism, what themes the delegitimizers use, what methods they apply, how they transmit their messages, and last but not least, who the delegitimizers of Israel are. This requires a huge research project, but I'll give you at least the headings. There are no shortcuts here. Without understanding in detail and the nature of the content of the process, you cannot fight the delegitimization of Israel in an effective way. You waste resources, money, time, people. What are the three main types of anti-Semitism? The original one, religious anti-Semitism. The next one is nationalistic, ethnic anti-Semitism, and the third one is anti-Israelism. This is also called anti-Zionism, delegitimization of Israel. And they have basically the same core element. All three types of anti-Semitism demonize Jews, be it in different functions. Now, what's the core element of anti-Semitism? That Jews are absolute evil. But in different culture, absolute evil, it differs. So, originally, in Christian anti-Semitism, the most evil thing you could invent was that the Jews had killed the Son of God, or killed a person whom the Christians believed to be God's Son. Now later people became more secularized, and so God became less central in society. And if God doesn't exist, killing his Son isn't a great crime. In ethnic nationalist anti-Semitism, absolute evil was to have been born as an inferior human being. The Jews were presented as vermin and bacteria, and in the Nazi mutation of ethnic anti-Semitism, Jews should be exterminated. For present Western society, absolute evil is Nazism. So, in the third major anti-Semitic mutation, which is anti-Israel, the state of Israel is a Nazi state. And as I have already mentioned, this is not a marginal opinion in the Western European countries, leave alone in Poland. 45% of the European population think that Israel intends to exterminate the Palestinians, that Israelis are Nazis. That tells a lot about Europe today. Now, we must also realize that the Palestinian Authority doesn't only promote anti-Israelism, but plain, outright anti-Semitism in its most extreme form. This cartoon, which I'm showing here to you, is from Al-Hayat Al-Yadida, the official daily of the Palestinian Authority. It depicts an old man in a jalaba, that's the 20th century. It takes leave of a young man on the right, who symbolized the 21st century, and who stands between them, a small Jew with an arrow pointing to him, saying the illness of the century. That is the Palestinians show the Jews as absolute evil. This is the official journal of the Palestinians. The Palestinians are deep anti-Semites. Not all of them, but in the core, many of them. Major lie is the blood libel. I mentioned it already. It starts in the British town of Norwich as a tool for the Christians to drive out the Jews of England. There it started, from there it comes. The false claim was that Jews had killed a Christian child for ritual purposes. I spoke to you about the daily Aftonbladet, our great social democrats from the so-called civilized Sweden. And they use the same lie, they just mutate it a little bit. The Jews need the blood, the organs of the Palestinians in order to save Jews. Now, back to the methods of demonization. There is another category in demonization which is far more complex than lies, accusations or exaggerations. And you cannot understand it easily, you have to study it in great detail. These are so-called fallacies. A fallacy differs from a factual information that it is based on reasoning and the arguments you use do not back up the conclusion. Major categories of fallacies of argument include emotional fallacies, ethical fallacies, and logical fallacies. Some of these fallacies are faulty analogies, double standards, inverting cause and result, moral equivalency, and so on. Conspiracy theories are also a type of fallacy. The most popular type of double standards is omission. For instance, you complain about Israel doing something in Gaza, and you don't mention that these people have first sent a few thousand rockets against you. Besides delegitimization in words, there is also delegitimization through acts. I can do terror, violence, boycotts. I can do condemnations by international organizations. I can distort international law. Yesterday, the whole morning, part of the morning, I had to listen to the number 2 of the Norwegian embassy, who said that his country, everything it did was driven by the occupation of Israel. Well, he lied a few other things, but what can I do? So, any demonizer of Israel can use a selection of these methods. You can make your own demonization cocktail. And in order to be successful, you have to repeat it frequently. So the Norwegian yesterday spoke 30 times about occupation in 10 minutes. And that is also what our Palestinian enemies are doing. Now, I have now taught you how you're going to demonize somebody. Now you need a vehicle to transmit it through, because it's something totally different to say here in a small gathering that your sister is a prostitute, or when I say it to you on a large TV broadcast. The fact is, of course, the vehicle is there much better. Now, what are the vehicles? Media, a few, media, internet, the United Nations. You can make statements on TV, op-eds in the media. The Arab countries can propose motions in the United Nations. You can create Israel hate sites on the internet. That are, in the postmodern period, you have a lot of vehicles. An important method of transmitting false messages is language. You use terms as refugees for people who have never lived here. Colonists, occupation. We don't do that. We should once start to speak about genocide-blind churches. The next issue is to identify perpetrator categories of delegitimization. I have identified 16 categories. I cannot, time Alan has given me, I can devote a quarter of a minute to them. Muslim states, the great leaders of, yesterday my friend Richard said to me, the only products which come out of the Muslim countries are oil and hate, and oil is not a true product because it's an exploration, it's found by exploration. Muslim states, media, the UN, Muslims in the Western world, Western governments, it's like Purim, NGOs, academics, trade unionists, church leaders, etc. We should also not forget Israeli anti-Semites and Jewish self-haters. Other aspects of the research should include what impact has delegitimization already made on Jews abroad and on Israel, both at home and in the diaspora. Issues of security, the hiding of identity, and many others. Well, what I have presented here was essentially a 3-hour presentation, which you got in the quick way, but at least you get a summary, and you can now go at work. There remains one question: how do you fight delegitimization of Israel? That's another lecture. I have told you how easy it is to demonize people, how difficult it is to fight it, and there is, of course, much more. Thank you for your attention.